Is it recording?
Yeah.
Hello. Welcome to bread making with me. You've asked for this video and now I am providing it. You're welcome. Okay, before we get started making the bread, bye!
See ya.
We need some supplies. Bread flour, salt, bottled water. It's very important that you get bottled water because the yeast does not like tap water. The chlorine in the water in your taps will prevent it from rising. You can drink it, not your yeast. So I'm not being fancy. You should really not use anything but bottled water for your sourdough. Wait, did I even say that we're gonna make sourdough? We're making sourdough. Ta-da! The other thing you will need is lactic acid. I bought this off of Amazon. I add this to increase the sourness of my sourdough. Okay, we're making the recipe for a high hydration dough. I'm aiming for 80%, so it's going to be really wet. And we're making 1 loaf. Most recipes ask you for like 2 loaves. I don't know why. I think because it takes so much time to make it, but we're going to aim for 1. So I have a weighing scale. You should get one if you don't have one. How are you even making bread without it? I would be surprised. For this dough, we want 370 grams of warm bottled water. And the temperature over here is really important. You will do some calculations. Write it down. You want to measure the air temperature. So I have this little guy here that I got off Amazon and I stick him everywhere in the house to check the temperature. It is 65. And then I have flour, and you want to check the flour temperature as well. I have this meat or candy thermometer. I don't know which one it is, but I got it for Christmas and it is awesome. You stick it in your flour, and mine reads 63. So what you want to do is you want to add your air temperature and your flour temperature, which is 65 plus 63. And then you want to add another 5 on top of that, which is the friction factor because you are making this by hand. So you have air temperature 65, flour temperature 63 plus 5. And then you take that summation and then you minus that from 225. So 225 minus all of that, I've already done the calculation, is 94, and that's what you want your water temperature to be. So I already heated this up and I've already weighed it out. It is 370. After you have all of that, you want to get your sourdough starter, which I have over here, and I fed her name is Sally, fed her last night, so she's been growing for 12 hours, more than 12 hours, and I put a rubber band around as an indicator to just see how much she's grown, and you want to wait for it to be double. And I'm sure you already know this, but you have to do a float test before you start using it, and what that means is you want to put the starter in the water, and if it doesn't float, it means it's not aerated enough, and then you want to just let it rise for a little bit longer before you use it. Otherwise, you won't get that much of a spring when you use the dough. Okay, so 370 water, and then I'm going to use 100 grams of starter. As you can see, it's really bubbly and aerated, so that's really good. I'm just going to do a little bit of a float test, but I don't want to drop it in because that might be like a false negative. So just a little guy, and it floats. Great. After you have your 100 grams of starter and water, you want to mix it until the water becomes milky and you don't have any big particles of the starter. I'm going to be using 450 grams of bread flour and 50 grams of wheat flour. The reason we're using bread flour is because it has higher protein than all-purpose flour, and that increases the gluten formation. You can use all-purpose flour if you want. I have an all-purpose flour from Trader Joe's, which has a higher protein content. It's 13%, which is pretty good for all-purpose flour, so you can also use that. I'm gonna mix it up. We're not gonna knead this bread. We're just gonna mix it so that right now there's no pockets of dried flour. And you can see it's already really sticky, and it's gonna be that way for the first 2 folds, and then it'll start coming together. poke it. I find this method really effective for getting rid of little packets of dry flour. Okay, don't play with it. Play with it? Who says no? You're an adult, you can play with it if you want. If you're not an adult, don't play with it. Children are not allowed to play with dough. That's what Nani said. At this point, I'm just gonna leave this. I'm gonna cover it with a cloth and then I'm gonna leave it for 30 minutes. We will start our swish and flick, or fold method if you're boring. It's been 30 minutes and now it's time to add salt, lactic acid, and warm water. So I've weighed out 10 grams of salt and I've added 5 grams of lactic acid. So I'm just going to pour that on top. And then we have 25 grams of warm bottled water. And we add that at this point to help dissolve the water and to get, help dissolve the salt and to get it better integrated. At this point, it's going to get wetter, which is fine, but we want that. And we're just going to really get in there and dissolve the salt. Depending on what kind of salt you have, it might require more time to dissolve it. I have sea salt, which are pretty big flakes, so it takes a while. And then if you don't like this sound, you're in for it. And when will you know it's done? You will know it's done when you're mixing it, you don't feel any abrasion on your hands and if the dough feels smooth. I'm almost there, so it shouldn't take more than a minute to do this whole thing. And it's pretty wet still, and it's going to remain like that. And then I'm going to cover it up with my cloth, and then I'm going to put it back in the oven with the pilot light on for another 30 minutes. All right, another 30 minutes have gone by, and at this point we have added all of the ingredients that need to go within the sourdough. At this point, as you can see, it is quite wet. This you have to wet your hands so that the dough doesn't stick to you, and then you want to first release it from the edges of your bowl. After this is done, the very first time we will do the folds, we will first create a seam side and a non-seam side. So we just fold everywhere into the middle, and then you want to take the dough and flip it. There you go. And then after you've flipped it, you kind of want to tuck it beneath itself. That way the seam is down and your smooth edge is on top. It's very important for you to wet your hands, otherwise the dough will stick to your fingers and it'll be really difficult to work with. This is my first fold. I'm going to continue folding the dough every 30 minutes for the next 4 hours. I covered the dough with my cloth, and I'm going to put it back in the oven with the pilot light on for another 30 minutes. Another 30 minutes have gone by, and I am now going to show you the coil fold method. Release from the edges, just same as before. When your hands are wet, you pick it up from the middle and you fold the top edge beneath itself. Rotate it, fold the top edge, loosen it a little bit, release below. Pick it up, release, pick it up, loosen, and bottom. And you can do this about 4 to 6 times. And this is just another way of folding. When your finger starts sticking again, you can just re-wet it. And I'm gonna put it back to rest for another 30 minutes, and then I'll be back. It's been another 30 minutes, so we're gonna wash our hands. We're gonna take off our glasses because who needs to see? And then we're gonna loosen it from the edges. And if you come closer, you will see the bubbles forming here Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. That's all of your hard work. Blood, sweat, tears. Hopefully not physically in the dough. And now I'm going to tuck and fold. My hands are wet. Pick up. Oh, beautiful. Like a baby's butt. Gorgeous. Absolutely stunning. Beautiful. 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 All right. That's about it. 4 to 6 times. Cover her up. Where does she go? In the oven. See you in 30. Hello. 30 minutes. It's 6 o'clock now. I started at 3:30. So I have about 2 more folds. Wet your hands. It's becoming more and more. Oh, I wish you could feel this. It's so soft, so billowy. Okay, I'm gonna lift and fold. It feels absolutely amazing. Just very, very soft. Extremely soft. Absolutely amazing. It's really smooth. You can also do a double fold, just like the one I just did, which is where you release it from both ends. Oh, it's really good. I'm more and more liking working with higher hydration doughs, just because they're so, personally I find it very easy to work with. And I feel like it tastes better. It's softer. The crumb is bigger, which I personally like. It's airy, not dense. Alright, another 30 minutes and we'll be back. Hello! Another 30 minutes have gone by. And the dough is getting bigger. Hands wet. Oh my god, look at how many bubs are in there. Wow. Oh my god, it's like touching water. Beautiful. It's extremely aerated. Hello. It has been our final 30 minutes and now it's time to pre-shape the dough. As you can see, it's extremely aerated and like, look at that. Boing. Really good. Okay, so now we're going to pre-shape and shape and then put it inside our bannetons to put it in the fridge. I have prepared a 1:1 by weight mixture of whole wheat flour and rice flour. And this is we're gonna use this mixture for dusting our bannetons and also for shaping it. And this is what will make the crust so beautiful. So I'm gonna add a little bit of flour to my workstation. And I'm gonna take my dough and dump it out. I'm gonna use a plastic bench scraper. And then I'm just going to very gently toss it. Okay, now I'm gonna wet my hands a little bit and just roll it. I watched a video one time where someone described this method of pre-shaping as suggesting the shape you want it to be, which I thought was funny. Okay, and now I'm going to cover it with my cloth. Just gonna very lightly flour my cloth so that it doesn't stick to my dough, and then we'll come back in 20 minutes. We're just gonna take a look at how it is. Oh, it looks really good. However, before we shape it, we're gonna prepare our banneton, and this is the banneton I've got. I prefer this shape because once the bread is made, it's easier to cut than the bowl or boule. How do you pronounce it? That is good. Okay. Now we're gonna shape the dough. At this point, I don't want to wet my hand. Instead, we will flour it. And this is gonna be like maybe a little bit tricky. You want to take your top left and your top right and then overlap them and start braiding them over each other. You do not want to add flour on top. This is going to be the inside of the dough. So that's a common mistake I've seen people make, where they will flour. There you go. And you want to hold it. And because it's a wet dough, it kind of seals itself. So you don't have to add any flour. There. And then when I'm at the end, I'm gonna just roll it over itself and then drag it in. Now at this point, the skin is very loose. So I'm gonna add more flour on top. And then now my main goal is to tighten the skin on top. So what I do for that is I just throw it forward and then slide my hands back. So here I put my palms on the edges and then I pull it back, and that makes the skin taut. So we want it to be in the shape of this kind of triangle. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do it a couple of times in the same direction to make it more rectangle. And then at this point, this is the most trickiest part, honestly, for me. We have to put it over in the banneton, and we want to do it in a way where the seam is up, so this part goes down. Okay, and then we're just gonna hold her and then put her in. There you go. That's pretty good. And then these ridges, I'm going to just pinch them in so that they remain closed at night. So do you see that? Did you see that bubble? I love making bread. And then I'm gonna put more flour on top. That would be nice. And I'm just gonna add a little more on the edges because it's gonna rise, so I don't want it to stick to the banneton. At this point, I am going to cover it up with the linen cloth that the banneton comes with. And then we're gonna put the linen on top. And we're gonna put it in the fridge for 12 hours. It's morning time. The first thing we want to do is take the dough out of the fridge and then start heating up your oven. I'll start heating it at 475 Fahrenheit. And then I have my Dutch oven over here, which is large Dutch oven. I got it on Christmas. It's a cast iron enamel coated Dutch oven. Second time I've done this, where I left my temperature gauge inside of the oven. No, it looks like this. How many am I gonna get through before I learn to not to do this? I don't know. This is the second one. But you know what? I like the smell of burnt plastic. My Dutch oven is in the oven. Oh my god. Are there other things that work like this? Like if it's a Dutch fridge, a freezer bag is meant to go in the freezer. They make it so easy for us. I haven't had my coffee yet. So it's been 10 minutes and now we are going to take out the bread from the banneton. This is what it looks like right now. Do you see that, big bubs? Oh, it feels so soft. It feels so soft. You just do that, essentially. Just plump it over and then we're gonna very gently lift it out. Just jiggle and don't pull. Don't pull. Oh, it didn't stick at all. Oh my gosh, she's beautiful. The reason we're using the Dutch oven with the lid on is because we want to retain the moisture that is inside of the Dutch oven. The bread will start releasing moisture and we want to trap that. You can use a glass Pyrex dish or anything else, and the reason I want to trap the moisture, especially in the first 25 minutes of baking, is because as soon as this dough will see the heat, it will start expanding and rising and giving you that beautiful rise that you want from your bread inside the oven. However, if you don't have that layer of moisture that's trapped inside with the bread, you will immediately start forming a crust on the bread. And if you form the crust on the bread, it prevents your dough from rising. So it's like blocking your dough from rising. So by putting the lid on, you're capturing all of the moisture, and by that you are preventing the crust from forming and allowing it to spring in the oven. If you don't have a Dutch oven, or you don't have a Pyrex dish, or you don't have anything that has a lid on, what you can do is put the dough just on a baking sheet and stick it in your oven, and then below that heat up a separate pan, just empty baking sheet, and then when you put the dough inside, in that extra pan just pour hot water, and that will steam up your oven and provide the moisture that you need. Alright, this is what the dough looks like right now after it's come out of the banneton. We're gonna score it. I have this lamb that came with my banneton. So first we want to put more of the flour, and then I'm just gonna spread it evenly. I want to do a diamond pattern this time. I've never done this before, so we'll see how it goes. I'm just gonna take my lamb, which is essentially a blade. If you don't have a lamb, you can use a blade. It's the same thing. And then I'm gonna go diagonally across the whole length of my dough. And you don't want to hesitate, and you don't want to hack on the bread. Very confidently and in a single line. Okay, now we're gonna do the other side. Just gonna go over it twice now itself. The reason the scoring is important is because it allows the dough to naturally find the weakest link, which is basically the scored pattern that we're creating right now. And when the dough expands, it'll expand along these lines instead of just finding the weakest spot, and then it'll just grow like a Frankenstein, which you don't want, unless you want a Frankenstein bread. You know, go for that. Okay, that looks really good. So I'm gonna move this bread over. I'm gonna bring out the extremely hot Dutch oven from the oven, and I'm gonna transfer the bread inside. It is extremely hot, so you have to be very careful. And then I'm gonna take my bread, I'm gonna hold it with the parchment paper and just drop it in. beautiful. And then I have done this in the past where I grabbed the lid without my mittens, and then, oh, it's really bad, isn't it? And then you stick her in. Hey Google, set a timer for 20 minutes.
20 minutes. And we're starting now.
So we're gonna do 20 minutes with the lid on at 475. After 20 minutes, we will take the lid off, reduce the temperature of the oven to 450, and then continue baking it for another 20 minutes. It is now time, it's been 20 minutes, to take off the lid. And there, it's come to meet me. Hello. She's amazing! And then remember that the Dutch oven is extremely hot. So I'm just gonna pull her out. She's beautiful! Okay, so how do we know it's done? When it's done, the bottom of it should sound hollow. So knock, knock. Who's there? It's Sourdough. Can you guess what I could do better with my scoring next time? Let me know if you got it. And I'm going to tell you now. What I think I should do next time is make sure that when I score them, little pieces like that are not touching, so that they completely separate out from each other. You get it out, you want to put it on a cooling rack. That's not optional. You have to put it on the cooling rack because there's still moisture from the dough that if you don't put on the cooling rack, it will condense and there will be moisture everywhere. So we're going to put it on the cooling rack for at least 30 minutes before you cut it. And then I'm just going to give you all angles. You can see that it's extremely well it made a really good spread. Okay, so this is it, and then I'll let you know once I cut it.